You want to play your favourite shooter on Linux, but it just doesn't work. You know your PC can handle it, but still the game just refuses to launch. And the reason usually comes down to one thing: anti-cheat. Before we dive in, I would just like to make something clear. I'm not a Linux expert, and I'm not an expert on anti-cheat. I've been on Windows for decades, and moving to Linux has been a real learning experience for me. This channel is all about that journey. What I'm sharing with you today is what I've learned along the way about why some companies block Linux instead of supporting it. I also spoke to somebody who claims to be a cheat developer. Now, I can't confirm that they really are, but actually what they said really does make sense. Anti-cheat exists to stop players from ruining online multiplayer games. Cheaters use aimbots, wall hacks, scripts, even hardware exploits to gain an advantage. If the game studio doesn't deal with that, it kills the experience for everyone. Now, modern anti-cheat systems like Easy Anti-Cheat or BattlEye run at a kernel level, which gives them deep access to the system so they can detect cheats hiding in memory or intercepting game data. Linux makes anti-cheat much more complicated. Unlike Windows, Linux is open source and highly customizable. Now that's great for freedom and privacy, but it makes implementing a good anti-cheat a lot harder. First, Linux isn't one thing. There are many distributions, like the best one, Fedora, and the others like Ubuntu, Arch, and more, each with its own libraries and kernel versions. Developers can't build one solution and expect it to work everywhere. Then there's control. On Linux, you can compile your own kernel. If an anti-cheat system tries to monitor system calls, a determined cheater can modify the OS and hide things in places the anti-cheat can't even see. I spoke to somebody in the comments who says they develop cheats. Now I can't verify that, but their explanation really puts things into perspective. Here's what they said off the back of my previous video on the subject.
If the whole argument is rootkit bad, then sure, you have a point. But your point is just a fever dream. In reality, cheating on Linux is way easier when going against the big dogs. Let's take Apex as an example.
What?
Linux cheats were freely available and if properly set up, never detected. That was never the case for Windows. I wonder why. Memory injection, or more realistically, memory access, is possible everywhere, but doing it on Windows with a rootkit running isn't easy to do in a way that won't get you banned. On Linux, it was trivial. And even if that was somehow solved, you could just compile your own kernel and add your own memory access code in a place the anti-cheat can't check. How about DMA or hypervisors? Well, attempting to detect DMA requires kernel access, technically doesn't on Linux, and detecting hypervisors is definitely easier when you have access to privileged instructions.
I then say, surely there's something that could be done on the server side, and he says,
many have tried already. The biggest problem with server-side anti-cheat is false positives. Sure, it will stop the blatant stuff, but that is already the case for a lot of games, even the ones using kernel anti-cheat. So sure, your little Jimmy will probably get banned, but this also means that pretty much the top few thousand players will be filled to the brim with legit cheaters. The people that are already good at the game and just need a little edge. You can detect blatant aimbot, you're not detecting the one that adjusts by 0.05 degrees on top of an already good player. And unless somebody is a complete moron, you're not catching wall hacks with an AI without banning half the player base with false positives. Client-side anti-cheat is pretty much the ideal scenario because you can make your cheats as sophisticated as you want. CS2 is a pretty good example of what not to do. I don't think server-side anti-cheat is the future. You can make it good enough that your average Joe won't be able to tell the difference between a good player and a cheater, but is that what we really want?
I then mention the number of players using Linux versus the number using Windows.
You're right, to a certain extent. The overall numbers weren't big. But 0.1% of the player base playing and cheating on Linux is enough to fully fill the entire leaderboard. If you give somebody the choice between spending $100 on DMA hardware, another $100 to $200 on firmware, EAC recently clapped like 90% of public ones, by the way, and another, let's say $20 a month for the cheat versus just downloading a free Linux distro, downloading a free cheat, and running 5 commands, I wonder what most people will pick. Banning Linux sucks, but it raises the barrier of entry quite drastically. Another thing that you can't do without an intrusive anti-cheat is hardware bans, because without it, spoofing is extremely easy. So I can just keep making new accounts all day long without worrying about anything. Even if the server-side anti-cheat is good enough to catch me after a few games, I just make a new account, run a single command, and I'm back to destroying games in maybe a few minutes.
Also, feel free to be mad at me. I don't make cheats for money. I hate this whole business. So much shady stuff going on. I make them for fun, as a challenge, for myself, and maybe a few close friends.
So when you hear that, it's a little bit easy to understand why some developers block Linux instead of supporting it. Apparently it costs a lot to maintain anti-cheat for Linux, and stopping cheats on an open system is hard. If Linux gamers are a tiny percentage of the audience, many companies decide that it isn't worth the risk and it certainly isn't worth the cost. So the Linux community hates this, especially now that Proton has made Linux gaming so much better. Anti-cheat companies like Anti-Cheat and BattlEye do support Linux, but developers need to enable it and test it, and many don't. Server-side solutions sound promising, but the cheap developer pointed out they have limits and can lead to false bans. Right now, Linux gaming is in a better place than it's ever been before, but anti-cheat is still the biggest barrier for many. What do you think? Should developers take the time to support Linux, even if it is harder and costs a lot more? Or is blocking it fair if it keeps cheaters out? Let me know in the comments if you found this interesting. You guys take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.